blinking light anymore.
How are you?
Good morning, everyone.
Today?
Welcome to the November 1st meeting of the Economic Development Commission.
How you doing?
Welcome, everybody, including our guests this morning. Looking forward to your presentation. We'll begin with the approval of the draft minutes of the October 4th meeting, which were in the materials sent out. Entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Okay, Everett, and second, Bob. All right, any comments, corrections, or changes?
I abstain. I wasn't here.
Okay. Any suggestions for changes or corrections? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Sean?
Good morning. Just a couple of quick updates. One is Ben and I attended a meeting at the high school the other day, Wednesday, and there's a new culinary program coming out from Great Bay Community College that was talked about. More to come on that, but there's the first cohort is going to be a non-credit 12-week boot camp that a lot of the names you know in the restaurant business in Portsmouth have been working with Great Bay and others on. So the first launch will be February of 2025. A lot more to come. It's kind of their beta test, but they're hoping to have, let's say, a dozen students going through that boot camp to feed into the kitchens of our restaurants. Next thing, I've been fortunate enough to secure an intern for winter break, which is about 5 weeks. The focus is going to be on where outdoor recreation meets the economy. Fortunately, we have a new rail trail. There's a lot of success stories around the state of how to leverage a resource like that for your small businesses. So Victoria will be working on doing some research and hopefully making some recommendations, something that I and Ben can carry forward to our business community. Victoria Drake, intern, she's coming in from UNH. So, and I've got some other folks who work in that space that are going to be supporting us in that. So more to come there. Did pilot the database in early October. Chose one of our neighborhoods. It was one of our areas. It was Lafayette Road, and was able to send an email from my city email out through Grow Lab and capture the responses, capture the kickbacks. Did get a handful of personal responses from people who received it and appreciated being contacted by the Economic Development Office. So a couple more bugs to work out, but the goal is to have it fully operational by the end of the year to make a much bigger push and outreach. So, yeah. If you didn't see, I don't have the details in front of me, but the offshore wind leases were awarded earlier this week. There were 4 of them in the Gulf of Maine. There were 2 different large foreign firms that were awarded the leases, so a lot more to come on that, and I'll defer to Ben because he sits on the committee now, or the commission, or the council, or whatever, that meets and talks about it for the state of New Hampshire. Excuse me. Just a couple other items of note. I recently been appointed to the Coast Board, so I'm the City of Portsmouth representative for Coast, which will give me a little more insight into all things transit and also was appointed to the board for the Portsmouth Propeller Club, which, if you don't know the Portsmouth Propeller Club, that is all things maritime. They advocate for all the businesses up and down the river, and they're getting pretty excited about their outreach to make sure that they, I guess, that they support any opportunities to improve our maritime business. And as much as we're adjacent to it, my attitude is anything that's good for the maritime industry is good for Portsmouth. So, lastly, there's the Market Square Master Plan meeting Monday night, right? Levinson Room, 6 to 8. So last opportunity, I believe, to provide public input and certainly hear what others are saying. And I'm attending, just as an FYI, I'm attending the New Hampshire 2024 Economic Forum, which is on November 14th. It's kind of an all-day affair in Manchester. If anybody wants information about that, I certainly can forward that to you. That's it, Tom.
Any questions for Sean? on the Monday night meeting, will there be a presentation, or is it going to be open-ended brainstorming session?
I don't know the answer to that, Tom.
I believe there is a presentation to share findings to date
Okay, great.
and start talking about recommendations, but I think they still have a little bit of work to do before they wrap up.
So that's in council?
Levinson Room.
Oh, Levinson, okay.
Yeah, at 6 o'clock.
Will that be broadcast?
I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. We may end up taping it and recording it and airing it later. I can find that out while we're sitting here.
Okay. Other questions for Sean? Thank you very much. Okay. Our business support working group. Any thoughts at this point? Andrew?
We do have our next meeting scheduled. The letter that was the conclusionary kind of letter that was presented to council did receive at least acknowledgement or some feedback on, so it was read. It was included in the councilor's packet at the last meeting. And the other agenda item we had Sean just addressed, which was monitoring and supporting his office with the CRM. We'll talk about that more in our next meeting coming up. So kind of a light month for the business support group.
Do you anticipate anything before the end of the year?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the first question of this next coming meeting is what's next. I think the group at the last meeting was feeling like this letter was kind of putting a bow on the project for the permitting and the Shanti Wolf presentation. So I think we're looking to look at next steps, but then also look at what our group can bring to the January retreat meeting and kind of get a head start on that as well.
Right. Okay, any questions of that group? Ann?
Public transportation group, economic resiliency. We had a small meeting. We're moving into other little areas of research. We're going to be asking Ben Van Camp to sit with us, and Sean and Ben Fletcher, and sort of investigate coordinating the people, the businesses downtown who move people, like the hotels, for instance, and how we can better help downtown workers. And Ben Fletcher, I think, will give us some input on that. What their experience is at Foundry Garage and how microtransit might change that. So that's sort of some of the baby steps of what we're looking at. Oh, thank you. Do you have anything to add to that, Tom?
No, I'm trying to remember what I'm not sure how up to date this group is on where your subgroup was before the last meeting, because
Oh, before the via transportation.
yeah.
Well, the other thing to investigate, which I have not investigated, is who are Via's competitors and what else might be out there, or other ways to do it, which that I don't have haven't started that thought. Via's presentation was pretty fully fleshed out, so I guess I would ask the group, any conversation on that, or areas where you think we should be kind of looking at after hearing theirs? They have been reaching out saying, what do you need? What can we help you with? So they would be happy to do deep dives into any little niche of their work that we would like.
Yeah, I think it was an interesting proposal. What I'm not sure of is how does what they have supplement what we have and what we need, and then what would be the steps for if we were to engage in a pilot based upon specific needs. So I think the model looks interesting. but I'm not quite sure like how it would be actually implemented for us.
I think that's what we're trying to figure out, is what might a pilot be? Because it wouldn't be a full-scale, here we go, all of it. It's going to be something small. So which small niche could we pilot and see what the response is to it?
And any feedback from any other groups within the city or councils within the city on the presentation? I know they spoke to a few different groups. So I think it's an intriguing proposal. To me, it seems like a car version of the bike program that we had.
Oh, the bike share.
Yes. So
Yeah.
maybe a little bit more applicable, but I definitely think that they showed from their other metro areas that they fulfilled a lot of needs that those communities had.
So were they going to give
communities-
us a proposal to, this is what it costs, this is what we,
I guess they would if we set some parameters on what we were looking for, but
So-
we don't know what we're looking for. It'd be hard for them to propose not knowing,
I see.
are we,
The question is, what is the problem we're trying to solve?
yeah, someone asked that
And
last
if-
week or last
and they
month.
can't define that for us, I don't believe. They're asking us
Okay.
that question.
It was, there is a city committee dedicated to these parking, transportation, and safety related items. I don't know what the process would look like to maybe form a working group of a few folks from there and a few folks from here to look at this a little further and discuss what is the problem to solve and look at a pilot project. But obviously, I don't think we'd want to go alone on something like this.
I believe there's a group in the city that helps support J1 visa kids as they come in seasonally, and they'll stay at people's homes, and they have sponsors, et cetera. And knowing one of those, we know one person who does that and has had a J1 visa, young adult from Ukraine with her off and on for a couple of years. And, it was interesting. I didn't think about VIA until I thought about her specific need, which was she'd be off on a bike late at night, riding around the city, and then riding back to Elwyn Park. And so it might be helpful to link with that group.
Right, the city doesn't offer that service or provide that. It could be the state's travel and tourism or BEA. We can certainly find out if there.
I think it's more like a
does that.
Facebook group. I think it's just some people.
Okay.
I don't think it's a very formal. I know about once a year you see a thing pop up saying, "Would anyone like to host
Right.
and it's just a person.
I think that was a very popular model, and I think it's probably fading. And I think most places that employ J1 students are now putting them in apartments and things like that, and have leases that they keep year round to house those students or those workers.
So I think, as I listen to the comments and thinking as a follow-up to the VIA presentation, that I think we have to kind of define what our role will be going forward. Assuming there's something there, should we be the committee or group to flesh it out? Or should we be making a recommendation to the council that it needs to create a special group or a hybrid group with existing ones? But I'm not sure we're really ready to make that decision without, as I say, fleshing out a little more information. The impression I get of VIA is that, they'll welcome to be any city or town's transportation solution, whatever you need, everything from fixed route to, an Uber model of on-demand. And I almost feel like we should try to figure out I don't think we're ready for a whole new transportation system. I think when I see the VIA opportunities, I see it as a supplement to what we have, or a supplement partial replacement, or some type of thing that would enhance the services that are available to the citizens at a potential cost savings, even depending on what the model is. But I think we almost have to break down the potential customers into smaller groups and really see if it works for those groups. So, for instance, we've got the hotels who are running shuttle buses back and forth. We've got Port City Air that's almost, a logistics company moving people in and out and having cars available for groups that are coming and going. We got certain employers, I think of like Novacure, that are going to be having a lot of people coming in and out of the downtown area. The question is are those groups served well with the system that exists, and is there an opportunity to serve those groups better? And is there an opportunity to, share the cost of that enhanced service without it simply being added on to the tax dollar? That's kind of the way I would approach it. So I don't know if other people feel otherwise on that, but I think probably we need to flesh this out a little bit more. I don't think we spend the next year on it, but I don't think we'll get it done in the next 60 days. And I think that's one of the values of meeting with Ben Fletcher. And so, for instance, we know that there are a lot of people who, a few hundred people who avail themselves of the benefit of that employee parking program within the garage. So I'm interested in knowing how many of those people are Portsmouth residents who might find it more cost-effective to have something that gets them close to their front door and back at an equal or comparable cost, something like that. And again, with the hotel services like to get out of the transportation, hotels like to get out of the transportation services and if they had something that could provide the same almost on-demand service for their visitors. So, but I think if people have ideas on how we should approach this, maybe you can chew on them, and when we come back in the December meeting, we can maybe give Ann's group a little more direction. That's my way of looking at it at this point.
Sounds good.
Okay, other
Send me your ideas.
All right, so we're ready to tee up for your presentation. David?
Christy's got the, is there a, do you know if there's a pointer thing?
Thank you. I don't think there's a pointer. It's too high tech, David.
I have to donate one for the, although I used one at the chamber breakfast, and I was a little tech challenge using it, as Ben can attest to.
That one's a little
I
sensitive.
had to keep, I didn't really, I had to.
Does that mean you don't want a pointer?
You gotta point it at the computer, not the screen.
I know, but I want to point it at the screen.
It's not our way.
I know.
Yeah, just USB's over here. It's an add-on.
Okay, got that in front of you, good, okay. Put the mics in front of us. Okay.
I think I need to share it for Anna to be able to see it.
Okay.
Hold on a second. No, you're not in my way at all. Technology.
While Karen's teeing this up, let me just say thank you for inviting us back again this year. I know 99% of the people here. John, I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you. David Choate with Colliers. Christy Russell is our research manager. She works out of our Manchester office and services all three of our offices in Portland, Portsmouth, and Manchester. So if you have, and this is just kind of an aside, if you have any reason to want information on the Portland submarket or other than the Portsmouth submarket, Christy would be the person to contact because she generates that information for across the company. So we're obviously today going to focus on the Portsmouth submarket. which basically, so do we have to tell you to move it? Is that what? Yep. Okay. Yeah, so Cyborg, just to reiterate, we've talked about a lot of this before, but New Hampshire Cyborg is the only commercial real estate board in New Hampshire. There are several of us in the room that are members of that, and we've given you websites in case you want information. They have a lot of really cool events if you want to sort of hobnob with commercial people. And then New England Commercial Property Exchange is our version of an MLS. It's really a information exchange, but it's now, and we just migrated over to the Moody's platform, which has been an interesting experience. So next slide, Karen. So what is the Portsmouth submarket? There's 17 towns that we just kind of arbitrarily decided that we think fit into the Portsmouth submarket. These are what the towns are. So when we talk about the Portsmouth submarket, this is the geographic area we're talking about. And we have, what, 5 other submarkets? Manchester, Salem,
Nashua, and Dover.
And Dover, yeah. Next, please. So office market criteria, and this is criteria that's established by Colliers Corporate. Buildings and condominiums, 10,000 square feet or more. So any statistics do not include anything under 10,000 feet. It's a little bit unfortunate, but we're bound by their criteria because of a lot of spaces that are under 10,000. Multi-tenant or single-tenant classified as A, B, or C, which is the office market designation. Excludes medical space. Again, another issue. We've been doing a lot of medical sales lately, interestingly enough. And asking rents are reported as modified gross. In commercial real estate, there's 3 ways of quoting rent. Triple net means the tenant pays for everything. Modified gross means the landlord's paying for something, usually the taxes and insurance and things like that, and the tenant pays utilities, but modified gross could also be the tenant paying, taxes, but not all 3 nets. And then all numbers are based on Q3 2024, so that's very recent, obviously, it just ended.
And one thing I want to add is we also don't track government buildings. So if it's a government-owned building, we don't include that as office, mainly because usually government buildings are occupied by them, so the occupancy and vacancy would never really change. So we don't, if it's 50% more, or if it's just owned by government, we don't include it. If a government agency is in a building that they don't own, we do track it.
So in other words, and that examples would be the passport and visa centers at Pease, for example. So the next slide is, this is where, in my opinion, it starts to get pretty interesting. So let's spend a minute on this. Office vacancy rate. We've all heard about how high the office vacancy rate is. And if you look at the top number, 18.2%, that is the Portsmouth submarket. And as we'll see in the next slide, that's dramatically skewed by Pease vacancies. And we've actually, at request of Tom and Sean, Christie broke down this market a lot more finitely on the next slide. Now, go back, Karen, one please. You'll notice the statewide is only 14.4%. And you could say, well, Manchester, Nashua, and those places have a lot more office buildings. Why don't they have a high rate? And it's primarily because a lot of the office buildings in Manchester are being converted to residential by Brady Sullivan and others. So that office, number of square feet of office has been going down. It's not that it's being absorbed by office, it's being absorbed by conversion. I think is that pretty much
That's a fair statement. The submarkets that have seen the most office vacancy due to office tenants leaving and staying office is Salem and Dover, which are smaller markets, 1 million square feet and under. So like David was saying, Manchester, the majority of the absorption is from conversion. Nashua's been pretty steady the way it is right now.
Yeah, another thing I'll point out, if you look at 2019, we were at 7.4% statewide and only 3.3% on the seacoast. So it's gone up 6 times in the course of 5 years. And again, this doesn't include under 10,000 square feet, which I think would push it up even higher. Sarah?
Can you talk about what's driving the conversion in Manchester? Is it the type of space? Is it the zoning? Is it the need? I'm interested in that.
I think I'll give my opinion and Christy can give hers. I think it's the fact that the zoning allows it, and there's a need in Manchester for both office and condos. I don't know if they're mainly being converted to office or condos, but the buildings are conducive to that, although you often hear that office buildings aren't. The biggest reason why you don't see it here is because you can't do residential at Pease. And what are the buildings, think of any other buildings that would lock, if everything in the market could be converted, what buildings outside of Pease would be candidates? Maybe the Service Federal Credit Union headquarters on Lafayette Road is a possibility, but there really aren't a lot of buildings over 1 and 2 stories outside of Pease.
A lot of the conversion is in downtown Manchester, so it's a lot of the towers being converted or the mills. Like David said, some of the Brady Sullivan mills that have already partially been converted, they're adding more. So that's part of it. It is harder, according to developers, it's harder to develop some of the buildings, but the one they've chosen are mostly towers. The other one is, the other conversions we're seeing is complete knockdown of buildings. It was actually an industrial building in Manchester that's now converted to 75 Canal Street that's opening next week. I think they have the ribbon cutting ceremony. So it is really just the downtown. So as soon as you get out of that downtown area, you're not seeing it as much. So I think the amenities, the thing that one of our other colleagues just wrote about is now, say in 5 years when all the residential is full and we have people looking for office space, we don't have a lot of office space in downtown Manchester anymore.
You see new construction. One of the things I might just point out, they're starting to see this in a mini scale in Portsmouth with Mark McNabb's proposal to convert the upper floors of the J.J. Newbury building. The Stady, although they knocked it down, it's residential. It's not going to be commercial anymore.
Do you have the numbers that are exclusive of Pease?
Yeah,
That's going to be on the next slide.
Next slide. We're going to. Yeah, Jen.
So do we have a sense of how many buildings between 2019 and 2020, like what is that percentage in comparison to? Do you understand what I'm saying? So like in 2019 we had 10 buildings, in 2024 we had 700 buildings.
Oh, that are being converted?
Yeah.
I don't know the number off the top of my head. I did just give it to a coworker, but I believe it's like 3% of the inventory has been converted over, but I can double check in Manchester specifically.
Oh, I mean for the Portsmouth submarket. I'm curious about
buildings?
I'm sorry?
You mean vacant buildings?
Well, so vacancy means there is empty space, right?
Yeah.
So my question is, how many spaces are there?
What's the
relatively?
denominator?
Yeah, so like
Footage. You mean
No,
square-
I think she means how many of that X thousands of square feet. How many buildings does that represent? Are you talking about?
no, I'm trying to understand vacancy compared to how much is available, because the number of actual buildings in 2019 is different, I assume, than 2024, right? The actual number of space,
I think
amount of
it's
space.
available square footage from 2019 to here, not necessarily buildings.
Okay, so in terms of available square footage, how much was there in 2019 compared to 2024? Because that vacancy percentage is just a percentage of how much is
So did we add too
left
much
open.
Have we
but
built
how,
buildings?
do you see, you see what I'm trying to say?
I think what you're saying, if I understand, and Chrissy's got some additional information, is there was less square footage probably in 2019 than
Yes,
there was
okay.
in 24, because there has been some building, but if you really look at what's being built in the last 5 years, it's not office building.
Gotcha,
There
okay.
have been some. 145 Maplewood Avenue is a good example.
75 Portsmouth Boulevard would also be.
Yeah, the building over at Portsmouth Boulevard. Go ahead. Do you have anything else? No.
No, I don't have the number in front of me for the vacancy, but I will say, like, overall Portsmouth submarket that we're talking about is about 4.5 million square feet. So obviously, like we were saying, there is a difference between the availability rate and the vacancy rate, though. I just wanted to point that out. So the available means it's just on the market, could mean that a tenant is still occupying the space, but they're going to leave by the end of next year. So those are two different numbers, just so everyone was aware.
I think that's what I'm trying to understand, is the availability compared to vacancy.
Yes.
So that makes sense. Okay.
So like the availability square footage right now for space that's directly being leased by the landlord is 496,000 square feet out of that 4.6 million square feet in the market. Does that make sense? Kind of.
Yeah, there are some, proposed office projects on the drawing board, whether they'll ever get built or not. I talked to Ryan Plummer the other day, and he said they are, in fact, going forward with the Sheraton project, but I think they're going to do the residential piece first. Whether they'll ever build the office building, who knows? And at Pease, I think there's a couple of sites left that could potentially be office building. The plastic surgeon guy has a site over there. But whether they'll get built, who knows? I mean, and the question is, how can they get financed, right? I look to the bankers in the room. Next slide, Karen. So this is a little more granular. You were asking the question, so let's spend a couple seconds on this and look at, starting from the top line down, that's the Pease vacancy rate. I alluded earlier, you can see it's 33.5% vacancy at Pease, and I would argue that it's higher than that. You go into some buildings, there's virtually no one in them. The second one, which is the light blue, is a Portsmouth submarket overall. That's at 18.2%, and then we come down to the city of Portsmouth itself, because don't forget the submarket is 17 towns. We're at 15.8%. Now, is that inclusive of Pease?
Yes, that includes
Okay.
Pease and downtown together, so that's just the city of Portsmouth.
So some of that vacancy rate obviously is in Newington at Pease, right? Pease is 33. It's gotta
Only
be-
the buildings that are in Portsmouth at Pease.
Yeah, right. And then the last one, which is the purple one, is downtown, which has a very low vacancy rate because there's not a lot of office space downtown, and that's there. It's like scattered here and there. I would think, and Bob or Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, the biggest component of that might be at 145 Maplewood, where there's a couple of spaces. And again, it's hard to track because some people are still paying rent, but they're not. They're gonna vacate. So
Yes, that was my question. What, and the definition of vacancy, does that include buildings that are under lease but are dark?
Shadow vacancy.
Shadow vacancy.
If we know that they are not using the space, like it's out there, we know, it would be included in the vacancy rate. If somebody's saying like there's one or two people in there, it is not included in the vacancy rate. If that makes sense. So it is gray area, we'll say. But
Right, so properties that are drastically underutilized and that are likely to be vacant in the future, but you don't know, they're not included here, you don't know.
correct.
Got it.
And that's kind of where it comes into the availability rate as well.
A little bit, I would say maybe 50% or maybe more, but because, usually the landlord's going to hire somebody to market them, right? And say, this space is available. Like we have a couple of those right now where the tenant's not leaving we have one deal where they're not leaving until March of next year, but we're already marketed, happens to be a sales situation. But we have other ones that are similar. So they're looking and saying, I'm going to start the marketing process maybe 6 months out. Right?
Which would affect our availability rate and not our vacancy rate.
I mean, part of the problem you have in an office market, frankly, is a lot of companies don't start looking till it's like the last minute. I'm working with one now that has to be out of their space by November 30th. Well, they need move-in space, basically. They can't afford any build-out. So, yeah, it's a little bit of a, it's not an exact science for sure, but I was struck by the 33% of Ps, which again, I think is low, but, based on visual observation, but.
And just a couple notes about this. This is just office, so the industrial vacancy rate is different at Pease. But, so the Portsmouth submarket that we're talking about is 4.6 million square feet. Looking just at the city of Portsmouth, that's 3.4 million square feet. So the majority of the Portsmouth submarket office space is in the city of Portsmouth. And then going even farther down, Pease has about 1 million square feet of office space that we track, and the downtown is about 600,000 square feet. But as a reminder, that's buildings over 10,000 square feet that are majority office use. So if it's, we'll say, residential on 5 floors, 1 office floor, and 1 retail, it's not going to be tracked in our numbers unless that 1 floor is 10,000 square feet.
Yeah, a lot of it's on Commerce Way, obviously. Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say, to Jen's point, I think the inventory overall, there's been a couple of new deliveries, but, you see the downtown vacancy creeping down. There's been 2 new buildings, so it really hasn't been a supply issue in the downtown. I think it's a product type issue, and we should all be eyes open about Pease and how we might be able to address that if that doesn't.
I mean, the reality is for office space downtown is $30, $40, $50 a square foot. And by the way, you don't get parking unless you're going to have to probably park in a Foundry garage or walk. Whereas at Pease, which, next slide, Karen, please. These are the rates. Now, the disconnect, in my opinion, if you look at Q3 24 versus Q2 and Q3, the asking rents haven't really come down much, if at all. If some places have gone up, I don't get it at Pease, frankly. If I had a building that was 75% empty, I'd be doing whatever I had to do to get tenants in there. But apparently, and the bankers can speak to this. I know there are covenants in their loan that they have to maintain a certain ratio, but, I guess, I don't know, because there's not a lot of negotiation. I mean, these are all modified gross rates, so they're including everything but utilities. So the base rate's probably at P is going to be $16, $17 a square foot. If I had an empty building, I'd say, you want to pay $12 a foot for the first year? Come on in. But we're not seeing those kind of incentives. I don't get it, frankly, but I'm not a developer, and I'm not the banker on the other side of the equation.
One quick question on the previous slide, and you don't have to go back, but how does now compare to pre-pandemic? Because the starting point on the slide was 2022, mid-pandemic. I'm curious if now that we're almost, 5 years out from it?
I think the last one had 2019, didn't it?
No.
It was 20.
No, I only did the last three for the
22,
in-depth dive.
you're right. Yeah.
The two slides before is a better, not that we need to go back. Oh, thank you. This is a better indication of what it was pre-pandemic to now, which is, again, the whole Portsmouth submarket. We are mostly the city of Portsmouth and the Portsmouth submarket. So it is higher. But, again, we've had bigger companies in Portsmouth leave recently, in I'll say last 2 years, that have completely shut down locations. They're slowly getting backfilled. Like Pease this year has had a couple small tenants, like small as in under 5,000 square feet. But when you have people leaving 80,000 or 50,000 square foot buildings, it's going to take a lot of time. So I will say it's like you can see in the graph, the light blue line, it is up, but you do have the dips, which is good. I think it's just going to take time to, I'll say, recover from some of those bigger companies now leaving.
Because now we're post-pandemic, most leases were 3 years? So do you think this is
3 to 5 year leases.
the new normal?
Some places still do it 5 years. I think we're going to see more vacancy. We've had some, just to give you an example, maybe I'm not a good marketer, but Novacure has some space at 135 Commerce that they lease. They have, at one time, had 2 floors of that building. They never occupied half of the first floor, which is about 9,000 square feet. We've had that listed for more than 6 months. We've had zero interest, like zero. It's turnkey space, 64 workspaces. That's the first problem, 64 workstations, right? I don't see any 64-person companies moving into the area, frankly. And, and they'll make a deal at whatever price they have to get somebody in there. We've had zero activity. I don't know what to do. I see these numbers, frankly, only going up over the next year, but we'll see. All right, let's go
It
back.
definitely has been smaller leases happening right now. We just found out about a tenant that renewed their lease for an entire building that they plan to only use half of, but they want to keep it for future growth. So again, it's just, I think companies are still trying to figure out what they want to do. So like David said, it's going to stay this way or it might still continue to creep up, but with smaller companies coming in, it's just not going to see a quick drop in the vacancy rate.
So some of the, again, a comment, we've already talked about it. Vacancy rate rose 2.3% over the past year. And then we talked about the Seacoast vacancy rate has increased as pre-pandemic leases expired. And the biggest, again, shock to me is the lease rates haven't come down significantly. So next, please.
Hang on one second.
Oh.
Ann, did you have a question? Sorry.
Well, on Novacure and Commerce Way in general, all of Commerce Way, is that uniformly
No.
somewhat vacant, or is that?
No, there's not much vacancy over there, actually, I don't think. The new building at 175 Portsmouth Boulevard.
75.
75 Portsmouth Boulevard is pretty full. I don't know they have any vacancy there now. I mean, people, if they're going to move, they want to go to a bigger, newer class, and again, it's all open concept, not a lot of private offices.
It's a little bit at 210 Commerce Way, but not much.
Not too much.
Right, yeah, there's not much, it's interesting. And a lot of people don't want to, but on the other hand, some people don't want to be over there because, it's a little,
Hang on
not
one
as
second.
upscale, so.
Got it.
Go ahead.
I was just going to mention, I know with some of the larger spaces, it's a little cost prohibitive at times. There is appetite, it seems, in the smaller space realm, but the cost of construction for, refitting or demising space in the smaller footprints isn't necessarily economically viable at asking lease rates where $16 a foot is still vacant and they can't justify necessarily spending $40 or $50 a foot to configure it for somebody to come in and not get an economic return. So I think that's a challenge too.
Yeah, I will say, the one thing, one interesting trend in the marketplace right now is there's a flight to economy or lower rates. We have a building, used to be the old Base Movie Theater at 30 International, which we're way below the market price-wise, and we've got a steady stream of people looking at the space. Now, they tend to be under 5,000 square feet, which is another factor, but, why should I pay 24 when I can pay, significantly less than that? So who knows whether that's going to continue or not. The next slide, please. So some of the observations, Portsmouth submarket is more active than Dover just because Dover doesn't have a lot of office space.
Minus the one, except for Liberty Mutual's building that they vacated.
Right, which my understanding is under contract, so I don't know if Sarah has any inside scoop on that. We don't know what it's going to be, but.
That's like 2 jobs ago, David. I don't know.
Come on, you're just not saying. I think companies requiring people to come back at least 3 days a week has led to fuller parking lots and pre-pandemic traffic levels in some areas. I still don't see a lot of companies requiring 5-day work weeks. There has been some expansion, Lighthouse Credit Union going up to Dover, Novacure coming downtown, obviously, but also we've had downsizing. FedPoint shed about 30,000 feet. Liberty Mutual obviously shed a ton of space up in Dover. And there's many more examples that we can give of companies downsizing, and I just don't see a lot of companies moving in. Totally different in industrial, which we'll get to in a minute. So again, coming back to my favorite subject that we hear every single day of the week is there's no place for my people to live if I do come to the area or want to expand. And that's even now the cry up in the Tri-City area. It's not just limited to Portsmouth. So you don't want me to get started on that whole discussion. But attracting employees is really the top challenge right now. And this is more industrial manufacturing, I would say, than office, but still, even office. You look at the average, there's not many houses or condominiums in Portsmouth selling for under $1 million now. Although it's all, you got to keep your perspective. I just got back from Martha's Vineyard, and there's very little there for under $5 million, so I guess it's all relative. Okay, next slide, please. Notable office deals, just FYI, 40 Pleasant Street, the Custom House building, obviously we all know Schimberg acquired that for $5.5 million, roughly $225 a square foot. That's the other thing about sale prices downtown. They're like all over the charts. I can show you sales of 600 foot and $225. I mean, just there's no rhyme or reason to it. Seacoast Pathology Medical's been very strong. Lately renewed space over at the old courthouse in Exeter. That's 1 Hampton Road. And then Cummings, Lamont, and McNamee actually went to Stratham, leased about 4,000 feet, didn't like being out in the pasture there, and then came back to Portsmouth and took over the space at 1 New Hampshire that used to be, way back, it was A.G. Edwards and Wells Fargo Advisors. So there have been some decent leases done.
And a couple more that we just ran out of time to update the presentation. Highliner is the one that I was talking about, renewed on International, and then Optima leased 12,000 square feet on Commerce Way. So some of that space has been leased up too.
Yeah, they took part of the Port City vet space because Port City moved to Pease and took over this SNHU building, 2 floors. Okay, next slide, please, Karen. This is, my favorite part of it because I do 75% industrial. So industrial criteria, again, buildings and condos over 10,000 feet. Single tenant classifies ABC.
That's not right. I'm sorry. That's supposed to be manufacturing, warehouse, and flex. That is a carryover. Sorry about that.
Yeah, but the rents are reported as triple net. So next slide, please. So look at the industrial vacancy rate in Portsmouth submarket. It's virtually non-existent, 1.2%. In 2019, it was 1.6%. Statewide, it's a higher vacancy rate. And it's primarily because there has not been much new construction except for purpose-built construction. We've got some examples of some buildings that are under construction now. But that's the biggest problem we have is the jobs are in manufacturing, the inventory is not here. We've got some availability in the Tri-City area, so that there's some movement up there, and we'll talk about the kinds of businesses. It's been very encouraging, because we have 2 or 3 larger industrial listings up in the Rochester, Dover area, and they've got like nonstop activity, but, the buildings aren't state-of-the-art buildings. So that number is not going to change until there's some significant industrial construction, and I don't know where it's going to occur in the Portsmouth submarket. Again, 17 towns, where is it going to occur? If you don't have water and sewer, it's pretty much a non-starter for most companies. So, and think of all the communities that are in those 17 that don't have water and sewer, which is most of them. Next slide.
Hang on, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. The statewide jump is from new construction. Merrimack, Nashua, Manchester are seeing the largest. There is one building in Salem that is still mostly vacant that was built at the beginning of 2023. But it's been the Life is Good building in Hudson. They are occupying 75% right now. It looks like they're supposed to go down to 50% in the near future, but they're occupying majority. And then there's a brand new building in Merrimack that has had no tenants, but it's built. And that, I believe, was Q2. It was ready for occupancy. So
the other, and we'll get to this in a second, but the other dynamic is the rate, the asking rate. Unlike office tenants, that will pretty much pay whatever they want if they want a space. If I want to be in the Brick Marketplace building and it's $50 a square foot, I want to pay it, even if my budget was $30 a foot. Industrial is not like that. If my budget's $12, $14, $15 a square foot triple net, I can't pay $20 a foot or $25 a foot. And the Merrimack building, or whatever you're talking about, is like $20 a foot or something.
yeah, most of the new construction is 18 and higher, 18 to, I'll say, 25.
That's why there's no new construction. In fact, I just had this discussion yesterday with a guy. He said, I want to build these new buildings, but I got to be at 20 plus a foot. And I said, well, good luck, because no one's going to pay it. No questions? Okay, next slide, please. All right, this is a little more detail on this. Pease, there's not a lot of industrial space over there. The 6.6% is probably, which buildings are those? That's probably 195 New Hampshire, 200 International, and then the third building, which is 222 International. Ipsum is looking to move out of there. They're in about 16,000 square feet. The middle line is the city of Portsmouth itself, which is 3.4%. There's a little bit of vacancy here and there, nothing, concrete. And we'll get to a new construction building that's under construction now on Banfield Road. And then the Portsmouth submarket, which is the larger group, it's even a smaller amount, 3.2%. So again, it's almost non-existent.
David, you might have given us a hint. This would not include the large warehouse logistics building that's being built out near.
Yeah, that's in the inventory.
As in
But it's not,
industrial?
but it's not empty. It basically,
So it hasn't been fully constructed yet.
So it's not here yet, correct.
Okay, that's what-
Once a building is completed and it's available where someone can move in, then it would hit the vacancy rate. Right now, since it's not, no one could go into it, it doesn't hit vacancy yet.
yeah, we should talk about that because it is pretty well finished. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It's 100,000. And so I'll just give you this story because it's interesting and not a lot of people know it. We all know that Fidelitone entered into a contract with the owners of the building to put up this 110,000 square foot building at Pease. And Fidelitone was a logistics company for some unnamed furniture company, which turns out to be Jordan's Furniture, by the way. And they lost the contract to Jordan's after they signed this long lease for 110,000 feet. And the landlord said, not my problem, you still owe rent. So they've gone out and released the space, 60% to HCA to do logistics center for all the hospitals that they now own in the area, and the other 40% were still in the final negotiation phases for another warehousing type of operation that I can't disclose, but if you read the article, you pretty much know who it is. So that building is pretty much 100% committed. I would argue that it's pretty well finished.
It is, okay.
Yeah,
So maybe Q3 it might hit, but it sounds like it's leased, so it might never hit the vacancy rate once completed.
Right. Yeah, hopefully it won't hit the vacancy rate. We got lucky. All right, next slide, please. So statewide markets returning to a healthier balance statewide. I'm going to emphasize that. Again, next to the lack of employees, which we talked about, the shortage of space is really a problem. We've got a number of companies that are looking for space, they can't find it, they want to grow, and we'll get to that in the next slide. But what's interesting is on the rates, we've had a pretty dramatic increase in rates. This doesn't go back far enough, but, you know, for a long time, industrial rates were $8, $9 a square foot, and now they're routinely $12 to $14, $15, something like that. Sublease asking rents is a little bit irrelevant because it's kind of, well, whatever somebody wants to charge to get somebody in there. You know, we just lease space on a sublease at $8.50 a square foot. It doesn't really matter. The point is that we don't have any space available, and that's the problem. So Portsmouth said, well, we want to attract a 20,000 square foot high-paying job aerospace company. Good luck, right? Where are they going to go?
To David's point about the sublease rate, it's usually one space that's driving that. Like right now in Portsmouth, there's 27,000 square feet for sublease in the warehouse category. So it's just not, that's why you usually see it go like this. It's one or two spaces that's impacting it.
Was that Cut Street? I think that's
Top of my head, I'm not sure.
I think that's Cut Street, the old Portsmouth paper building. Okay, next slide, please.
Hang on.
I just want, so this also 10,000 square foot criteria.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it doesn't really matter. I mean, there's really no space of any size. I mean, once in a while, we'll get a couple thousand square feet, but not often. Next slide, please, Karen. So kind of the summary comments. Warehousing and distribution spaces are still in high demand, especially high bay spaces, but there's really no spaces or very few under 10,000 square feet. The cost of building, as we talked about, installing new buildings, and, you know, rents are jumping fairly dramatically, or have jumped fairly dramatically, especially in the Tri-City submarket, which is Dover. And then what's interesting, though, in the Dover market, and we have a building on Crosby Road that we're going to see a picture of the new building coming up. A company called CA Design, acquired by HEICO, which is a international company. And they basically do small batch, high precision manufacturing for aerospace and defense. They were running 3 shifts a day in a 28,000 square foot building. They're moving to Exeter in one of the Osram Sylvania buildings, and they've added on to it's now over 100,000 square feet. And their building has attracted a number of other machine type companies, all doing, again, electronic manufacturing, defense. The other one is firearms. Obviously, we all know about Sig Sauer, but there are a number. Thompson Center Arms is growing again. Company over on Dover called Q. They used to be down at the Portsmouth paper building. So there's a lot of that. But again, what do those companies need? They don't need high bay. They need lots of power. Okay, so that's usually the killer on those deals. But there's a lot of activity in that right now. Probably surprisingly, I think. And they are able to keep their employees. They don't need a lot, but they're able to keep them, which is nice. But they're going to keep moving further and further because that's where the employees are. Next, please. So here's some just notable industrial deals. A building that Andy was involved in for a while. R.J. Kelly acquired a building in Dover for, if you look at the square foot number, 137 foot. That's kind of.
Oh, this is
That's
Portsmouth.
Portsmouth. That's 6 Post.
This is Portsmouth.
Oh, that's Post Road, sorry about that. Oh, yeah, that's the Post Road building, sorry. They also acquired one in Dover. But this is just Sig Sauer, obviously, up in Exeter, just leased additional building up there. And then 4 Cut Street, Duckfeet, which Todd Adelman leased some space in the warehouse. Again, just some notable deals. Next slide, please, Karen.
Sorry, before you switch, Karen.
Yeah.
So a couple other deals that have happened over the last quarter, more recently. A lot of them actually have been happening in Newmarket on Forbes Road. I know Andy did a deal over there. We have Glove Box Systems. They're going into part of the new construction at 7 Forbes. Obviously, SIG is there. The other one is Trigger House. They leased, I believe it was 51,000 square feet. Now I think that's a little high in my head. It might be 15,000 on International as well. So we are still seeing leases at Keys as well. None of the ones up there are. But on the R.J. Kelly comment, they've been purchasing a lot of buildings throughout New Hampshire. But what we've seen with them, and kind of what we were talking about in office, the smaller blocks of office are being leased. Some landlords, like Philip was saying, we're not demising down. And R.J. Kelly is one of those. They want to keep the larger tenants, have less tenants in the building, and we'll wait for those tenants. We're seeing that a lot more on the industrial side. We're not seeing people downsize their square footage right now. Majority of the demand is in those, I'll say, 5,000 square foot range still. So we're just seeing some buildings stay on the market long, less in Portsmouth because there's not a lot of inventory available, more in other markets.
Okay, next slide, please. So there is some construction going on. Some of these we already talked about, but the 70 to 80 Corporate Drive is Lonza. If you drive through Pease, you can see it. Multi-million-dollar building employing dozens of contractors. It's been a great boon for the economy. Some of those contractors are actually leasing office space because they look at it as a 2 or 3 year project. 100 New Hampshire Avenue, we just talked about. That's the Fidelitone building. 19 Continental is a building that's approved for cold storage over in Exeter at Garrison Glen Corporate Park. 131 Portsmouth Avenue is CA Design. I talked about them. That's the building where the company in Dover is moving to by the end of the year. In fact, they're already operating out of there partially. They took a building that was about half that size and expanded it. I mentioned Banfield Road. The site work is being done now at 375 Banfield Road. This is the old junkyard out there that's been subject to a number of lawsuits on contamination. 75,000 square feet. To my knowledge, they don't have a tenant yet. Andy or Bob, correct me if I'm wrong on that. So they're kind of building a spec building. I don't think it's going to be a multi-tenant building because the layout is going to probably be a single-tenant building. The tenant that's going into hopefully One New Hampshire, actually, we went pretty far down the road on this building, but we couldn't make it work logistically, so they bailed out. And then the building in Kingston, which is by the Sears Logistics Center, is rumored, that building is rumored to be Costco warehouse distribution, but nobody will confirm it, so I can only say it's a rumor.
It's pretty serious.
Yeah, well, I mean, nobody will confirm it, right?
And it's next to a building that's mostly vacant with a very high lease rate.
It's, well, you could, logistics centers, they need high bay, lots of, you can see a ton of loading docks on the left-hand side of the picture. Yeah, it's kind of weird because the Sears building, as we all call it, has a lot of space available. Next slide, please. I think we are at the end. Okay, so if you want to get the latest report, you can scan the QR code from your camera or e-blast sign up. Some of you I know are on Christie's mailing list. We'd love to add you if you're interested, and feel free to reach out to her at any time with any specific questions on any of the markets, or even if it's not the ones we talked about today, because she's a whiz at having all that information.
And trying not to monopolize all your time, we obviously took the retail out. If anybody is interested, I have like a one page that I can send to you guys, or I can send it to Sean or Andy, who can circulate it.
Yeah.
Sean, and is it okay?
Please.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know, again, it would be similar to the in-depth look at Portsmouth. I won't say Pease in that situation, but downtown, and we'll say the strip centers.
Yeah. Any final questions?
Go ahead. Sorry, David.
No, I was going to say, I don't know that there's much that the EDC can do to address any of the concerns that we raised, because a lot of them are outside the city limits in terms of, I mean, there's not much, if any, industrial land left, for example. Obviously, office buildings, mostly at Pease, there's not like a lot of office zone land that could be, turned into an office. So, but again, it's the old adage, which I know the city's starting to make a little bit of progress on, is housing. So, but I don't know what to tell you. We do see what's an interesting. I didn't mention this earlier. What has been an interesting kind of byproduct of what's going on in Massachusetts, a lot of companies looking over the border into Seabrook area, in that general vicinity for space, which doesn't exist in Seabrook either, by the way.
Is that more so than in the past? Haven't they always looked north?
I think so, yeah. I think so.
More.
But again, lack of availability is a problem. So any other questions? If not, we will, yes, Sean.
Sorry, Tom. I need to do this before I forget. I'd like to, Christy, thank you. Every time I ask for information, you provide it. And in addition to this, Christy provided some information that I can provide to the city for economic conditions. So thank you very much.
No problem at all. Anytime.
Yeah, we're happy to be a resource. And again, you got two good commercial minds sitting on your committee here, so they can help out on that. But if you want to drill down, if anybody wants to drill down on a particular item that you heard today, like Jen was asking a very good question about how many buildings does this include and so forth, that we'd be happy to to break down. We have the information, we present it all, we'd be here till noontime, which I know you love being here. But still.
We do. We missed you.
Yeah, and I'm actually, because Andy's here and can carry the sword, I'm going to probably leave with Christie. But again, we thank you for this.
I do
Yeah,
have.
Tom, go ahead, sorry.
Without getting into the same deep dive, are the Portland and Manchester markets similar thing with the high vacancy rates for offices, low industrial? I mean, are we reflective of the larger region, or are we?
I think it's different in Portsmouth. Portland, like Manchester, because they have more towers, are seeing on the office side, office conversion to multifamily as well. They're actually seeing more than Manchester right now. So they also have some office development going on, the Rue Institute. I'm not sure who's familiar with what. So that it was, I believe, B&M Beans.
Yes.
Their
That's right.
manufacturing office is now going to be the Rue Institute, which is hopefully for the city of Portsmouth also going to drive up other tech startups coming more to Portland. In Manchester, different than here, I'm sure everyone knows about Army. It's becoming more of a biotech hub, or at least that's the goal for the Millyard, which has seen a lot of vacancies. Southern New Hampshire moved out of a lot of Millyard space into their own building. So we're seeing more tech, biotech accompanying that. So Portsmouth is slightly different because it doesn't have either the conversion on the office side or the type of companies it's attracting right now. Part of that is just due to the space that is available. On the industrial side for Manchester has the more construction right now, so our vacancy rate is much higher. Our lease rates are much higher as well right now due to that new construction. Portland is more similar to this for industrial. They have some space, but not a lot in the city of Portland, obviously. As you go farther out, South Portland, and keep it working your way out, you do have some space, but there are a lot of tenants leasing bigger square footage up there than here we're seeing right now.
It's a much bigger, it's like 200,000 person market. The one project we didn't talk about that maybe within the next 5 years will have an impact on the Dover market, submarket, is the West Edge project at UNH. If that gets going, I understand they have one company that's pretty interested in doing that. If you're not familiar with that, I'd urge you to Google West Edge, UNH, and find out about it. It's a high-tech, which they anticipate having housing and high-tech, kind of an Army situation. That's going to provide a lot of, but I think I don't know what's going to happen with the project. But
And you have Dover adding a lot of housing, which is helpful for all of this conversation.
Right. Yeah, Dover has a ton of units approved right now that are going to come online, and yeah, there's a lot going on in Dover, and they just dropped, not that Portsmouth ever had them, but Dover just dropped all their impact fees, which a lot of the towns have had in the past. I don't think Portsmouth's ever had impact fees, but so there's the communities are trying to do things, but again, the issue, as we all know, is not the cities; it's the towns that are not contributing to this. And what can I tell you? There's a lot of things keep an eye on the legislature. I know Ben, and I'm on the Government Affairs Committee. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be coming back to the legislature this year relating to housing and affordable development of all types. So just want to keep your mind on that as you go forth in the year, see what's happening. So, anyways.
Final question for you. So it seems to me the biggest thing to extract from this is that Pease is skewing all the numbers for this area on the office.
On the office, yeah.
And that's the one area, as you've identified, where you can't convert to other uses. So is there anything that can be done to address that, or do the office owners out there simply have to wait this out for some indeterminate amount of time?
I think it depends upon what you mean by address.
The PDA has been pretty adamant about not, doing that because they're in the job creation business. It's like we represented Enterprise Park in Dover, which is basically sold out now. And I had a number of people during the course of my marketing of that wanted to do either residential or boat storage or something that didn't generate jobs. the Dover Industrial Business Development Authority was adamant. We want people, we're going to sell the land for next to nothing, but we want you to build a manufacturing building and create jobs. So don't talk to us about housing, don't talk to us about dead storage. And I think that's pretty much what Pease has been. I mean, that down the road a number of times.
And not speaking for anyone from Pease, I think it's going to be a waiting game because, again, they are doing some of the smaller leases, but with the big square footage, they're just piece by piece. They are ones that are able to subdivide for whatever reason. So I think it is a waiting game, almost just slowly attracting more people to the area. But I think it's a slow process.
And again, just a final comment, I think, like Manchester, be careful what you wish for, because let's suppose Pease all of a sudden said, yeah, you can convert the buildings to residential, and that 31% went down to 5%. Well, 5-10 years from now, there's a big office demand, right? Where are they going to go? So it's...
I would say one thing for us to be willing to have a discussion about is maybe with what we're hearing on industrial. I know it's a different use than office space. There's still job creation. It's not housing. It seems like there's maybe a little more flexibility. There's some excess land. I know it's a zoning question, and I know it's a use question, but if we could stay away from housing, but we're hearing that we have zero industrial land for development. I mean, if it might not be economically viable, but if some of those parcels have excess land, you could put some complementary or, more airport-oriented or industrial use that may be a way to subsidize.
My favorite subject, which I've heard no discussion about, is rezoning industrial properties to allow employer housing on the property. And I've heard no further discussion on that. I think that some lots are big enough, not many, but there's some lots that might be big enough. I call it the old water country solution, where they were going to build that dormitory they never built it, but to me, that would be, you could limit it to people that are employed by the company. I have a very good friend who some of you know, Jamie French, did that in Kingston. He basically didn't build them, but he acquired some multifamily properties for his employees and subsidized their housing so he could keep his employees. I mean, to me, that's, there are some people that wouldn't mind living next to the plant. I mean, frankly.
It's like the industrial resolution.
Well, yeah, but
Atlantic Heights.
yeah, and the other thing you got to remember is most of these industrial sites are located close to services and buses. So, anyways.
Okay, thank you very much.
Happy to come back anytime. And
always a pleasure. Thank you, Christy.
Thank you, Christy.
And
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you. Keep up the good work, and we'll hopefully see you in a year.
Okay. All right, Ben, would you like to give us a chamber?
Yeah, sure. I always say I'm going to be brief, and then I start writing things down, and the list is 10 things long, so I'm going to go through it as quickly as I can. I just do want to echo Sean's comment on the new culinary program at Great Bay Community College. I think that's a big deal. It was 3 years in the making, and if you want to give kudos to some folks, Evan Mallett and David Vargas and Jay McSherry were really the ones that kept pushing the community college to get this done. And were really instrumental into that. So that's really a case of industry stepping up to, really speak on their needs and advocate for themselves, and I'm just very thankful for them. Sean did mention the offshore wind. The committee I'm serving on is a relatively new thing that was spun up from the last legislative session, which is focused on the workforce needs for offshore wind. So it's not so much about leases and power generation and that sort of stuff. It's more about the workforce to support that industry. And that's a committee comprised of a variety of state and local leaders and industry folks to see what we can do to start working on the preparation for that workforce demand now. And that we've only had one meeting, but it's off to a start, I guess. I just want to remind some folks of a few things that are going on. One, Restaurant Week kicks off next week, next Thursday, the 7th to the 16th. We have 34 restaurants participating this year. That number is up. That's due to some price changing that we did. There's now, instead of 2 price points, there's 3. That created a little bit more flexibility for restaurants to jump in and have a little bit more variety in how they can work with their menus and things like that. Last month, I think I shared that we were announcing a new program called Local Love. It's sort of art round town for retail. That is the third Thursday of each month. So we already had one. We have our second one coming up on the 21st of November. We had a great little kickoff event for that. Tom, thanks for being there. Sean was there as well, a few other folks. So that's going to be ongoing. And I will say we have 27 retailers participating in that program right now. I think that number will continue to grow. And in my 9 years now in this this work, it's the first time I've seen 27 retailers come together and partner on something. So it's great. It's encouraging to see that community come together and realize that they're stronger working together than working independently, and really excited about that. I just want to highlight a few other things. On the 13th of November, Catapult, which is our Young Professionals Association for the Seacoast, is their 10 to Watch Awards, and that is highlighting the top 10 young professionals here on the Seacoast each year. They kind of nominate 20, 10 get the nod, and it's just a great way to celebrate our up-and-coming leaders and current leaders that are in that young professional space. Also on the kind of award side of things, on December 2nd, we have our annual awards. It's a luncheon. It'll be at the AC Hotel. We have our small and large businesses of the year. This year we've added a nonprofit of the year award. We also recognize some people that have been impactful to us at the Chamber. A few things on travel and tourism. There's a new leadership change there. There's a new director of travel and tourism that was announced Wednesday. Was approved by Governor and Council. That is Michelle Cruz. She is, for the next few weeks, wrapping up her time as the Mount Washington Valley Chamber of Commerce president and will be leading the travel and tourism team. I've worked with Michelle for years. She's lovely and smart and is going to do a great job in that role. And something of note, separately but travel and tourism related, soon there will be two new initiatives there through some federal dollars that came through. It's a $2 million program that has going to be split into two pieces. One will be, for the first time, the state's going to do some regional destination marketing. And that's so they'll look at the Seacoast and say, how can we promote the Seacoast and do that sort of work versus just how do we promote the state as a whole. So there'll be some regional destination marketing programs, and the other one is going to be a workforce recruitment campaign. So actually spending dollars to recruit people into jobs in the industry and talk about career pathways in the hospitality sector. There was one more. Two things. Just your monthly reminder that tonight is Art Round Town. Do take an opportunity to visit that. And if you're looking for 25 minutes of quality entertainment, our podcast at the Chamber, the Collaborate and Listen podcast, features none other than Miss Sarah LaChance this week. Talking a little bit about the EDC, but talking a lot about elections and Sarah's role as an election worker, working the polls and election security and all that fun stuff. So timely with the election next week, which I think we're all ready to have behind us. So that's all we have from the Chamber Collaborative.
What's the time on that?
Great.
The time, when it's live?
The podcast is live now. If you just go to Spotify, whatever you get your podcast,
Cool.
Collaborate and Listen. You can. There's a season and a half out there right now, so that's
Awesome.
like 10 episodes. Albert?
Ben, any update or feedback on the cruise ships that came this summer?
Yeah, I will say that the cruise ships were a lovely addition that probably didn't move the needle much for anyone in particular. So if you take the cruise ship, there's 100-ish people on the boat. What we've learned is not all 100-ish get off the boat. Some don't get off. So there's, say, 70 or 80% get off the boat. So you're talking 75 people that got off and explored the town for the day. The demographic of that group is skews older, and so they get off. They probably take a walk around Strawberry Bank. Maybe they visit the Albacore. Maybe they get some lunch. Maybe they visit a retailer or two, and then they're back on the boat. So it was a no cars, no fuss. No negatives to it as far as I'm concerned, but not giant numbers on the spending, I don't think either, but great little addition to town. Every little bit, every drop in the bucket fills the bucket up. So I think that's our opinion. I don't know if the city has other thoughts or opinions on that, but
Well, I'll just say, as an example of those 100 folks, there may have been 4 or 5 that would do a Portsmouth bike tour. And that's probably about the number. And today, if you look on the website, they have more visits planned, but as we see, those can shift. Originally, they were at 6, they came here 4 times. There may be 6 or 7 or 8 planned for next year, but those are always in question until the schedule is set based on their bookings. The one concern we had, and a lot of it had to do with the construction on Islington up to Maplewood, was the buses. And I rode the buses with them. They understand how tight the corners are. I'm going to keep pushing them to bring smaller buses. I just don't know if they can make that work. I mean, they don't put 100 people on and drive to Strawberry Bank.
Yeah, I'm sorry, so there are buses that meet them at the port and then take them?
It follows the ship.
they're turnkey,
And they're branded.
Mr. Chairman, the reason we learned that the cruise ship company owns their own fleet of buses, so it's not so easy to say, could you just pull out of thin air a smaller bus? And due to security reasons at the port, that's one of the reasons the bus comes all the way to the cruise terminal, picks the people up. They just can't wander through the port. From the Peace Development Authority perspective, because I'm on the board, it was very minimal impact. It came at a time when there weren't many larger cargo ships, and it's also at a time when the Market Square Marine Terminal is benefiting from a new wharf, if you will. It's a lot easier to dock there. There are more. There are opportunities for vessels of different size to take advantage of the port. So it's a nice book of business for the port. To Ben's point, it's having minimal negative impact. It's a.
Because when you talk to people in town, of course, their concern was what are the size of the ships that are coming in, and A and B is we don't have the infrastructure to handle.
Right.
On a 8-foot sidewalk on Market Street, we can't handle. So it's good to hear that it.
Yeah, there was a tremendous amount of anxiety about them coming to town, and I think it was a lot of fuss for not much impact.
If it puts it into perspective, the Memorial Bridge didn't even have to go halfway up to accommodate them.
Good.
I think when you say cruise ship, you think of these monstrosities,
Coastal cruise vessel, I believe, is the term.
The official term.
I will say,
Cruise ship is incorrect.
We have had we've had people come into the visitor center that were introduced to Portsmouth on the cruise boat and liked the community and have chosen to travel back independently of the cruise. So I think there are some, side effects of them being here that are positive for the community.
One less house because of that.
I was waiting to see.
There's one less house because of that.
Yes, do
It's a
people
way for
come
us to
back?
market the city without spending.
Because it's been, I know
Good list to be on, yeah.
Portsmouth Historic was putting together a tour at a specific time for them, and they were averaging 8 to 10 people.
Right.
So and Strawberry Bank, very small numbers.
I'm going to break in because it's going to be pumpkin hour shortly, so I want to give Vince a chance to give us a city council report.
Okay, very, very brief today. One of the things that happened last city council meeting is we passed the was it the first reading of the purchasing procedures ordinance, and this is driven in part by the acquisition of a new software that is very visible to all parties. And so your contractors, your whole bid process and stuff is visible to everybody who needs to see it. And the procedures follow a path that is much more efficient. So that was past the first reading, and we'll come back for a second reading, I guess, this next meeting. And it seemed very good. A kind of annoyance thing is we passed a second reading on the traffic parking and towing ordinance, and if anyone's had a boot, they don't like Portsmouth, and And part of it was just that doing a lot more notification of people that have accumulated a lot of things. I think that we don't want to discourage people by, towing and putting on boots. The third thing is the Gateway Neighborhood Overlay District. We passed the first reading of that. Is that the first reading?
We did pass the second reading. Third reading is set for November 18th.
And that has a big impact on, or hope to have a big impact on workforce housing, basically.
Can I add a couple things,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair? And
Sure.
the council recognized 30 years of Massimo Morgia being in
Yeah.
business. That was really nice. The Route 1 corridor study, which is being conducted by New Hampshire DOT and benefits from our working group of city residents and employers, is going to has asked for presentation time on November 18th at 6 p.m. in a work session, so we can all learn what the latest and greatest is relative to the Route 1 corridor improvements and what some of their preliminary recommendations are. And we will be talking about the status of the Sherburne property RFP at the November 18th council meeting. There were 4 proposals submitted by the 4 highest-ranking firms from the RFQ round. We're really excited about the depth and breadth of what we received, and Sean serves as one of the 8 members on the review committee, and we will talk further about that on November 14th in a joint work session with the Housing Subcommittee, the Housing Blue Ribbon Committee, and then formally at the November 18th meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add, if you haven't seen the movie that was presented by the New Hampshire Film Festival featuring Massimo and the kind of a story of the North End urban renewal, is very interesting, very well done. It's kind of a oral history of what was happening there. So if you haven't seen that, I would say it's worth seeing.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Vince? All right. A couple quick items. Just a reminder, next meeting is at the high school at the CTE rooms.
I get to sleep in.
They requested an 8:15 start.
Even more.
Hooray!
8:15.
Start for the meeting or
Start.
start for their presentation part of it?
For us to show up there.
All right.
I mean, I can.
Well, no,
I can say we can go back. We can go earlier, and when the kids get there, they get there, and we'll just have to.
well, so what we've done in the past is we've had some of our business meeting before their
Yep.
program starts.
Okay.
Otherwise, we will be there till 10, so. Well, let me ask it, do people care if we started later, if it's going to run later, or just prefer to stick as close to 9 and 9:30 as possible?
9 to 9:30 is best for me, but if we have enough clarity ahead of time, then I can reschedule meetings. So I would like to know in the next week or so what
Okay.
our start and end times will be.
All right. Is there a sense as to what your preference is?
Yeah, my preference would be to try to wrap up by 9:30, but I'm also one person, so
All right.
So we're going to
try to be
propose
flexible.
8 to 9:30,
Yeah.
or would
Yeah.
you like to start at 7:30?
8 to 9:30 works.
We'll do 8 to 9:30, and we'll try to get they don't need to start at 8:15.
Right.
They just don't want us
Right.
to. Okay, let's try 8 to 9:30
Okay.
then. Okay.
Great.
All right. Looking at, I assume, briefly, you can think about this until the next meeting, but I assume we're going to have a workshop again in January, and Friday worked well for us the last couple things, so we're looking at January 17th or January 24th. So when you come back at the next meeting, if you'll let us know which of those dates work best, we'll try to get something, same rough time frame as last time.
So like a lunch morning, trying to remember even.
What was last?
It was
I
afternoon.
think we did a half day where it was either just after lunch or up until lunch in the Levinson room.
Yeah. We didn't stop for lunch, but we had some
Right.
food there, so. Okay. I guess that's it. Any new business? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Nay, ayes have it. You all.